Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran jazz pianist Kenny Werner. He was born in Brooklyn and grew up in Oceanside, Long Island, and started playing and performing at a very young age. It was 11 years old that he first recorded on TV, and he never stopped after that. He talked about his latest 2018 CD called The Space, and it's a great story about creative fortitude. He's been a world-class pianist and composer for over 40 years with a prolific output of compositions, recordings, and publications, giving good energy to audiences around the world and the universe. He had plenty to say, so get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, Kenny, thank you for taking a minute out. It's an honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
And I want to start off, I've had a great time listening to The Space, and I want to know from you, what did you want to convey to the audience with this album?
It's funny, language is a funny thing. I wanted to get out of the way and let it convey whatever that is. You know, there's two general flows of creativity that people believe in. Some people are very scientific, and they believe in control and crafting and, crafting a message and then expressing that message. Then there's some more people are a little more mystical and believe that the best outcomes come when they let go, meaning even the outcomes for other people. So if you take that as an analogy to this, I let go so that the benefits for the people listening would be from a place where they get what they need rather than me deciding what music is. Does that make any sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah.
I never quite said it that way. So what I wanted to do is I wasn't the conveyor, I was the vehicle for whoever and whatever the conveyor is. And I wanted to get out of the way so people could get the results of whatever that wanted to be. I guess I could say it that way.
So how does this differ from what you've done before? You've been at it for 40-plus years. You've released a lot of albums. How do you view each successive album? Is it as its own entity, or is there kind of a continuing dialogue?
No, well, they're their own entity. I mean, I have obviously a through line with my trio. We were together. I mean, we're kind of together. We don't really play much now because I've just thought we all need to do other things. But it's like 20 years, and I don't know how many records, 6, 7 records. And no, it's only the music that gets prepared at that time, and we think it's ready to cook, or it's ready to take out of the oven when it's time to do a record. But every record, it's been I think I've always been into this mystical idea of get out of the way and let the, what do you call higher power, universal consciousness. Some people like the word God. Personally, that word's been kind of ruined for me by use in nefarious, in the name of nefarious activities. But, this force that we all know that we're part of. But when you make a record, different records, I had different goals, and sometimes the more specific of a goal I had, the better the record. Like I did one which almost no one heard because it was in Japan, and the company folded, and it was only released in Japan, but it's kind of people know about it, and it's, kind of got that reputation. It's called Paintings. And on that record, I decided that it's the best record I ever did, I think, from a composer's point of view, because I studied certain painters, and I let what I saw from those paintings guide the compositions. So in other records, I would just be trying to create a certain idea. There was another one called Lawn Chair Society, that the one and only record I did for Blue Note. And in my mind, it was at that time in the early 2000s where much of the world was suffering, and America was like in a country club atmosphere. And so I wanted to show the almost cartoonish idea. So there are times as a composer, I have a point of view. But in all my records, I've tried to let this cosmic element come through. And what happens is you also have this nagging thing about, the level of the music. How great is the music? And how great will everybody agree is the music? And I have to admit, that's ego. And that gets in the way of this cosmic consciousness. On this record, I totally released the need to make a great record and allowed the cosmic consciousness, or what I call the space. That's why I named it the space. In my book, there's a chapter on the space. And it is really that vast, limitless territory beyond the conscious mind. And this is the first record that I felt like this is not about my playing. This is about the space and what wants to come from there. And that's why I thought the title was momentous for me. Because it was the first time I borrowed anything from Effortless Mastering, my record, my book, and said, this is it. This is not just what I write about or teach. This is my music right here. So, I mean, I've always attempted to it, but I'd say in every record, in some way or another, ego got in the way. The need for people to think it's an amazing record. Actually, the way of this cosmic idea of let it be what it's going to be.
Yeah,
so
I like that.
Long-winded answer, but hopefully it was clear enough.
It is. It's totally clear. The one thing that's interesting about your life, and I can tap into a little bit from a personal standpoint. My father was born in Brooklyn, and he was raised in Long Island. He joined the Air Force to see the world and God, stuck in Kansas City and fell in love, and here I am. So what I want to ask is this. What was it about your childhood that lent you to not only get into music, but to fall in love with jazz?
What got me into music was, from the time I started to play it, that I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I had a really great talent for it. So it just was easier to do than everything else. I mean, being totally honest. And also, it seemed to be something I might have done before. And people's reaction to it, it's just there are ego reasons that you want to play. People love you when you play. And I didn't really catch the bug for jazz until I went to college. I was listening to probably, with a few exceptions, I was listening to the same stuff any kid was listening to in those days on AM radio, pop music or some classical music. My father had a lot of Fats Waller records, so my early playing really is influenced by Fats Waller because I didn't know there was another way to play. So as a kid, I played stride piano. In fact, I had an act and I was on TV playing stride piano as an 11-year-old. So I fell into it because there was so much more access for me than anything else that I would have to work at, like anyone else would have to work at. I started to dabble in jazz in high school, and then in college, I was a concert piano major, but I was living with a jazz freak, a Charlie Parker type saxophone player. So I started to hear all the music, and I thought it was great. But this idea of consciousness I'm talking about, the record that moved me in that direction was a Miles Davis record called In a Silent Way. And when I heard that record, I found myself go into a cosmic state. And I said, that's what I want. This is what I got to do. It never was just about the music. It was about what does it do to me and what do I become and what moves me towards the light and what moves me away from the light. And the music of the 70s and late 60s, and Train and, that amazing period was a very mystical period. Most of the titles of the records were, philosophical or spiritual concepts. Really, the fact that it was jazz was secondary. Then in the 80s, jazz turned into its sort of quasi-museum period, which happens with everything. It happens with religion, and everything gets to be about, this is what the music is about. And had I come along in the 80s, I wouldn't have had the slightest interest. What interested me about jazz when I came into it in the 70s is that it was a medium for consciousness. And I've always been, back then, I was consuming things that created instant consciousness. And then later on, I actually spent a good part of my life pursuing practices that create consciousness, And so that music did it to me. I put that on and I was gone for the entire length of the record. So, and after that, I went to Berkeley, which then just the influence of the group. All my friends were really great jazz players, and by the time I left Berkeley, I was a jazz player. I don't recall exactly choosing it. It's just that you play with who you play with, and then you get a phone call, and they got a gig, and that's what it is. My head was not screwed on right when you talk about high school, college, and, what they say about the 70s. I'm sure you've heard it. If you remember them, you weren't there.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how I got to where I got to, but if I had my head on straight, I would have done what my first love would have been, which was scoring, would have been, and still could be, you never know, scoring movies. I actually think my music sounds like I'm scoring movies very often because I let that in. Instead of thinking there's a jazz model and I have to be it, growing in the music means growing to know more and more personally and admitting out loud who you really are and what you're not. So as I got older, I said, wait a minute, these things that I'm ashamed, for example, living in Long Island, like you said, if in college, if someone asked me, where are you from, I would have said New York. I wouldn't have said Long Island.
Sure.
So as you get older, you say, let me take every little imperfection and thing I'm embarrassed by and embrace it. And what happens is your music changes in a way that's much more authentic to you. And that's what my thing has been, a discovery process over all this time.
So let me ask you this. Over your career, you played with a lot of luminaries, a lot of big names like Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, Toots Thielmans, all across the board. What did these masters teach you about the jazz craft that stuck with you for all these decades?
With Mel Lewis and Archie Shepp, as a matter of fact, too, I noticed that they effortlessly made the music they made. If you watch, when I played with Mel Lewis, it was interesting perspectives because the whole band's facing the audience, but the piano player is facing the back of the stage, and that's Mel. So I'm sitting there looking at Mel, and he's sitting there looking like Buddha. And he could play anything, but the expression on his face or his body never changed. So I learned great ease and mastery from those guys. And from Toots Thielman, I learned a love of music that I don't know if I even ever had myself. I never met anybody that's just loved music as much as he did and wore that love on his sleeve. So, different things from different people. With Archie Shepp, I learned how you can walk out on stage, be completely non-concerned with what's going on around you, put the horn in your mouth, and let it happen. There could be a lot of turmoil around him, and he was completely, it's not that he either was unaware of it or he didn't care about it. Sort of a quality like Thelonious Monk, And it was great to be around that and see that you can be in your own lane, and you don't have to worry what's going on in the other lanes around you. So those are some of the things. Thad Jones, I just flat out learned what genius writing is about, and it definitely, I have two jazz orchestra records out. A lot of people don't know, but with the Brussels Jazz Orchestra, and every once in a while I'll go back to a tune that's just got that juice, and I know it from being influenced of playing Thad Jones charts for 10 years.
So you've won so many awards over your career. You got a Guggenheim Fellowship. Your albums have won awards. My question is this. I don't want to know what your favorite award is, but what award did you get in your career that totally surprised you?
Well, I don't know if I got that many awards. I haven't won a Grammy. I guess the fact that I was nominated for a song I wrote as a composer, not even a jazz player, and I think it was 2001 or 2002. That was a complete surprise. The Guggenheim was very, very satisfying because it affirmed me as a composer, and it really helped me to take myself more seriously as a composer. So I'd have to say that was a major one.
So up to this point in your career, after 4+ decades, are you happy with where you're at?
I am now. I've gone through a lot of periods where I wasn't. A lot of people won't admit that, but I thought with the kind of music I'm making, I should have more access to the audiences I want at the prices I want. But it wasn't really prices so much as access. The more access you get, the more you can exercise your creativity. And much of that period, I was stunted by things I would have created, but it wasn't that easy access. And, the next thing I think about, we're doing it. No, there's a lot to negotiate to get it done. To get it available, to get the opportunity. So I wasn't happy for a lot of it. I moved into a phase now, based on, I've kind of come around after all these years to embracing what I created, not as a player, but as an author. For years it was always about the next gig, and I've had people send me thousands of people send me such messages of gratitude for what my book, Effortless Mastery, had done for them. And I just kind of ignored it, moved on, because all I cared about was my next gig. And then one day, about 5-6 years ago, my wife and I, it's a long story, but the short story is that my wife and I were talking, and she said, why don't you embrace that, what you've created there? It's unlike what any other musician has created, And I said, well, maybe it's time to do that. I put it out to Berkeley that I'm ready to create new courses based on Effortless Mastery, and I got right back from them that they'd be honored to have me do that. And as a result, I'm now the artistic director of the Effortless Mastery Institute at Berkeley. And I am absolutely developing a new paradigm for how people can lift the veil for themselves and find the greatness in themselves and therefore in their own playing. And I have to say, the flashes people get of that are a bigger kick to me now than actually playing a concert. So I am very satisfied where I am right now. I don't think it's about playing anymore. It's about helping others to find. I've had so many sparkling moments of playing. It doesn't matter who I played with, and that stuff's interesting, but the inner light would be just blazing. And, there are people that have never met that inner light or have had one flash in their whole lifetime. And the courses I'm working on are designed to draw that greatness out that everybody possesses. And I have to say I'm very satisfied with the access I have to create there. For example, I'm writing more words than music. I have to force myself to write music. I just did a beautiful quartet with Esperanza Spalding and Terry Lynn Carrington and Dave Liebman. It'll be an LP. Actually, James Genius plays on the record. And it'll be an LP. I think it's going to be out next year with Nouvelle. And it came out really nice, but it was the first time I had to write new music in a while, and I really had to force myself. But I could walk into my studio right now and write a new chapter of my book. I am finally writing a follow-up to Effortless Mastery, and it's called Becoming the Instrument. And that's what I'm all about, and helping other people to do that is very exciting to me.
So you've dedicated your life to the world of jazz. Tell me why do you love jazz?
I love jazz because of what you were able to do under the quality. All right, a few things I love about jazz. You make a mistake, and if you make a mistake with self-affirmation, it can become a new music. There's no other music that evolves so much in such a short amount of time. Classical music evolved over centuries. Folk music, rock music, blues doesn't evolve. You either play it or you're not playing it. Jazz can be reshaped over and over. Exactly the thing the guys in the 80s didn't like is exactly what I liked, is that you could use jazz to reshape your sound and your message over and over again. And what happened is that when some, ethnic guys laid claim to jazz, and I agree with that too. They pointed out stuff that was getting lost, and why should it happen to their music and not classical music? Why should it happen to their music and not Brazilian music? I get it. That's why people started to say, I play jazz and improvised music, because if somebody wants to lay claim to too clear an identity of jazz is, then you have to play that music. You can't play yourself. The only way you can play jazz is to imitate what they told you jazz is. And that's never been my bag. I've never been interested in recreating. I'm interested in that cosmic moment of creating, and I don't care what you call it. For me, I'm not really wedded to the word jazz, but the history of jazz is the kind of innovation that it just fit me best in terms of the idea of being able to evolve any kind of idea at any time. I don't think you can really call out another music that allows that kind of big tent, I guess. So that's what I love about it the most.
Everyone has a version of who you are, or a perception of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, and your fans, but you know you. Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a person who is trying to evolve, for one, selfish reasons, because I've always suffered with the pain of self-obsession is various levels of pain for different people. For me, it's always caused a lot of pain. And I've been looking for freedom. And I think I'm a student of how to attain freedom in mind, body, heart, and soul. That's who I am. I'm a seeker of that more than anything. Give me that and I'll give you back the music if you want.
Beautiful.
And
I love that.
The only reason the music is important at all is if it facilitates this freedom I've been seeking all my life. If I can tell you that, I recently had an epiphany. Never quite satisfied, because I was under the impression that more should have happened in my career based on how I played and how I composed. And so I thought a lifetime, it didn't happen as much as I thought it should have happened. And then recently, and I believe in reincarnation too, so the purpose of this lifetime was to clear a lot of scars from some other lifetime and really find what everybody actually has available to them, which is a supreme self that resides within them. And the more they identify with that, the more those things get burned up as karma. And that's my purpose. And if that's the case, here I am in ripe old age. I'm in the mid and moving faster in the 60s. I'm getting happier and happier. So therefore, I use this lifetime well.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say.
I love it. No, that's a beautiful epiphany. Yeah. And Kenny, thank you for being so illuminating and opening up about your career and your new album. Good luck on it. And thank you for all the music.
Sure, and thank you for asking good questions.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Kenny for his cool, his music, and all of those stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.